is one particular teacher necessary? And also, connected or separately, I would like another or an explanation of what is the direct path. I mean, okay. I enjoy this very much.
These are two questions. Okay. So, the first question, theoretically, a human teacher is not necessary. There are sages who didn't have a human teacher. However, if you have already met a teacher, it was necessary. The direct path, it means the path after a glimpse that creates an irreversible doubt about the limited nature of consciousness. You see, a glimpse, a realization, and as a result of this understanding or realization, we are not sure any longer that our consciousness is limited in any fashion or form. For instance, that it has a beginning in time, an end in time, that it is dependent upon this human body, that it is localized in space. So whatever spiritual progress or takes place from this doubt is what I call the direct path. Because when we come from this doubt, we cannot come from the belief to be a separate entity. You understand that? We cannot, at the same time, believe to be a separate and limited entity or consciousness and not believe it, right? Meaning having a doubt. So, as long as we are on the spiritual path, still believing to be a separate consciousness is not the direct path. Any moment, we are on the spiritual path, but with this not believing to be a separate and limited consciousness, we are on the direct path. So that's a clear, I hope, explanation, because at any moment we can ask ourselves, am I certain to be a separate consciousness or not? And we can find the answer within ourselves.
But you said we could, the three energy, Shiva, we can...
It corresponds to that, yes. The gradual path is, in the Trika tradition, what is called the path of the individual. And the direct path would be the path of the energy. Because there is still a path. There is still somehow a question asked, just as a scientist asked by conducting an experiment, asks nature a question. The outcome of the experiment is nature's answer to the question which is asked by the scientist. I don't know. Is there gravity on the surface of the Earth? So you conduct the experiment I conducted the other day. The answer is yes. Okay, that's nature's answer. So, in a similar fashion, on the direct path, because we have doubts about consciousness being limited, we conduct experiments asking reality, consciousness, are you limited or not? The response we get to this question is God's answer, if you will. When we get the answer, we are no longer on the direct path. We are in God's hands. Whether we stay there or not, but when we get the answer, we know. And in this knowing, that's what is called the path of Shiva in the Trika tradition. If the doubt arises again, we can always ask the question again. So we move from one path to the other, but once we have this glimpse, which is irreversible, this irreversible doubt, somehow we cannot really fall back, not really fall back into the belief to be separate. Old habits of separation may still seem to be active, may seem to trigger the old reactions, the old behavioral patterns, but they cannot stick. But already, as we conduct the experiments, we are already in wisdom. That also is important to understand. When we make a bet, the French philosopher Pascal, philosopher, physicist, mathematician, he had a very powerful glimpse, and that changed his life. But he was within the parameters of Christianity. And then he had this argument that we should bet that God exists. Because we don't know, so it's like 50-50, right? If it doesn't exist, we have nothing to lose. If it does exist, we have everything to win. But it's not the correct way to play your money at the casino. Because this outcome of the existence of God, you get the reward in the afterlife. You don't get an immediate reward, you know. So what I suggest is a different type of bet. You bet that consciousness is universal, since you don't know whether it's universal or not. Right? If it is not universal, you have nothing to lose, because it will be the way it used to be before. If it is universal, every time you bet in this direction, you get a reward. because the outcome is more harmony both within you and without. So it's a kind of win-win situation. So you can enjoy the reward in this world because, the scripture says peace on earth, I don't know, paix sur terre aux hommes de bonne volonté, peace on earth to the men and women of goodwill. I don't know the exact formulation in English. It doesn't say peace in heaven later on after you're dead. It says right now, if you're of goodwill, meaning if you make the right bet, you experience the peace now. So that's the direct path, to be open to the possibility that consciousness is universal and constantly playing at the casino at every moment, always on the same side.
And wanting to forcibly get out of the path of jiva, is that a bad thing? Or, to want to progress, to be on the path of energy all the time?
Well, it's a free country. We remain, it is not imposed onto us to believe to be a separate entity. Therefore, if we choose to believe that way, it's our freedom. Many people choose that way, although they have an intuition of the divine. So they have this mystic fiber in them, but they are reluctant to give up their separate identity.
Because it's scary, to live in the world and...
No, they can be religious people. They can have some mystical experience, revelation of God. But at the same time, they see themselves as a separate reality of God, from God. So in a sense, every sage is mystic. Although it may not look that way, but every sage is a mystic because the experience of pure consciousness is the experience of God. And they have the same love for the Absolute. But every mystic is not a sage to the extent that they are still on the progressive path. And they still see themselves as a separate consciousness.